Hey guys, how's it going? This is Nick from the OP Poker team, and today we're back with another session review that's been submitted to us from our Discord community. So today we're going to be taking a look over a game that was played by our community member, Go Vegan. We're going to assess how he's playing, we're going to talk a little bit of strategy, and we're going to see if there's anything that we can improve on. So let's get into our game. Okay guys, let's jump into our session review now. What has happened is Go Vegan has sent me a handful of videos, and I've just picked one. I've cropped it out of the video that he sent across, and I've had to stretch it a little bit to fit on the screen, but you should be able to see everything you need to see. We're just going to watch one single video. This is the first time I've seen the video as well, so we're both watching it in real time for the first time, and let's see how we are getting on in these games. So if I can get over here and press play really quick. Here we go. So it looks like that was the end of the last game. We're getting into our fresh game now. These are $1 games, by the way, and we are playing for 6 times our buy-in. These are $1 games, and this is a 6. So let's see how Go Vegan is doing here. All right, so limp on the button, and a limp in the small blind, and 8-6 is a check. This is totally fine. I think this is fine so far. Check from the small. We check as well. Seems reasonable. And a check on the button. Okay, cool. Snap check from the small blind here. And what does our friend want to do? Looks like he's going to make it 40 to go. So here's the interesting spot. I think this bet is probably fine. My only real concern in this situation is about what our button is doing here. So if they're the kind of person that's limping a very wide range of hands here, this is a situation where they're probably going to take a stab at a lot of flops that come ace, ace high, king high. So if our friend has absolutely no hand on the button, there's a really good chance that they would have bet already, right? Which would have made our 6 stronger on the turn. We also probably wouldn't have been in the pot, but that's a different story altogether. So the fact that he limps in here and then doesn't bet the flop does make me think that he actually might have a made hand. The fact that he checks back on the flop could mean that he has a 10 or something like that as well. Unlikely to have flush draws, unlikely to have a hand like queen jack or king queen here. So I think the bet is fine. I mean, considering that we're playing the $1 stakes, you could very well just have the best hand here, and you do want to bet an amount where an overcard can't fall that gives them a pair which is going to beat you, and you also want to charge hands like 4-5 that have like a random gut shot and stuff like that. So I think I like the bet in this situation, but we need to be a little bit careful if we start getting called, especially from the button. I think the small blind is basically completely brick this flop, so we'll see what happens. 40 is a good size if you choose to bet. And we get to a river, which is the 4 of hearts. At this stage, I think we definitely want to check, because a lot of the stuff that we were beating, we're still going to be beating on the river. And there's also not too many like draws that we're going to want to like check call against here as well, right? So for the most part, if he had the flush draw on the flop, he would have bet the flop, and then we would have a better idea of the shape of his hand. When he checks flop and then calls turn, I mean, in this situation, the problem is he can have better 6s. He could be in here with king 6 or something like that. And when we bet turn and then check river, we basically never have a 10. We basically never have an ace. So you might even be tempted to try and go for a value bet with a hand like king 6 or queen 6 or something like that. So I think the check makes a lot of sense here, which looks like is what he's reaching for. He does make the check, and then hoping for a check back, of course. He goes ahead and puts 80 into this pot. At this point, I think we just got to make the fold. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised to find him with an ace here. He might even have a hand like ace 5 with the 5 of spades or something like that, just because he feels like he's really protected by both the 5 spade blocker and also the fact that he's got top pair in a pot where no one else is showing any aggression. So this is definitely a texture where if he has like top pair and a spade in his hand or something like that, he's going to feel really confident about checking flop, or he's going to feel like he wants to check flop quite often. Generally speaking, I'm not really limping any aces in this scenario, so I'm not going to say that this is a play that I'm going to sign off on necessarily, where he's limping the button with an ace. But I think when he bets this river, he's not going to have very many bluffs at all unless he's doing something pretty unusual. And I think minimum he's going to have like a strong 6 or maybe a 10. Maybe even the ace, we never really know. Especially at these stakes, you never really know what people are doing. And it looks though he's going to make the call. Ace of spades, 4 of diamonds. Okay, cool. So it looks like our read is pretty spot on here. He has the ace with a spade in his hand. I do understand why he calls in this scenario. I would feel a lot better about it. I would feel better about the call if the flop was rainbow and then the 6 was the 6 of spades or something like that. So when we bet turn, he was in a situation where he could have had a flush draw and then missed the flush draw and then turned his hand into a bluff. That would make more sense. But when he checks back on the flop and then bets and then calls turn and then bets river, I think we probably need to get away from our hand here. Tough spot though, and I can totally appreciate why they made the call. But I think you need to consider what kind of stuff they're going to be checking flop with and then calling turn with as well here. So tricky one, but I think the call definitely something that people could be involved with quite often. It's something that probably a lot of people are going to be doing. Ace 8, shove from the small blind here. Okay, so we're about 18 big blinds effective. We have 18 big blinds behind. I think this is probably totally fine, especially at these stakes where people are going to be min-raising the button a little bit more frequently than they should in a lot of situations. Generally speaking, Ace 8 is quite a strong hand. There's a lot of situations where we're going broke with Ace 8. You know, it's right up there, you know, in our hand strength sort of range. At this stack depth, I think shoving Ace 8 is totally fine. Ace 9 is 100% a shove. In fact, we would shove Ace 9 off even deeper than this as well. Ace Queen, hopefully we'll get some action with this hand. I do apologize for the noise outside, by the way, guys. Got lots of cars driving by my house today. Okay, so we got King Queen in the big blind here. Looks like he's trying to decide what to do with it. By the way, Goving, and I appreciate that you're kind of showing us your thought process with the slider. Okay, opts for the call. Let's pause for a moment and think about this. So you could certainly 3-bet King Queen in this situation. It's a very strong hand. King Queen is one of those hands that does really well against a shoving range as well. So if we 3-bet and then they go all in, King Queen is going to do quite well, generally speaking, against his entire range there a lot of the time because we have nice big cards. So we usually are flipping against pairs. We're pretty much a coin flip, so like 60-40 or something against most aces that aren't ace king or ace queen. I actually am probably leaning more towards the call. I think I prefer the call in this situation with King Queen a little bit more because in this situation we want to play more pots with these kinds of players down at these stakes more often. And if we get if we put ourselves in situations where opponents can shove over the top, we're kind of negating a lot of our post flop value that we can get. We don't want to overestimate how much post flop value we can get. That's very common. People think, yeah, I'm just going to call pre-flop and then I'm going to outplay him. You know, I think people sometimes overestimate their ability to outplay. But at this stack depth, hands like King Queen can be so hyper value. And remember, convincing someone to put chips in bad when you have 100%, when you have the best hand flat out, is a situation where you're going to be generating chips EV without having any variation whatsoever, right? So in a situation where we get King Queen all in, we might generally have just over 50% or something like that. That means that we're only going to win half of the pots. That means our EV in those situations are only half of the entire pot, right? But if we can put ourselves in situations where we have a very strong hand and we bet river or we get them all in on the river where we know we have the best hand, we win those chips outright, and those chips that are awarded to us will go straight into our EV line, and that will show as. So if the pot is 100 chips, we will win 100. Whereas if the pot is 100 chips and we're getting it all in pre-flop, we're only going to win something like 50% of those chips in EV dollars. So I think I prefer the flat in this situation. If you have King Queen suited, however, I think it's a different story. I think King Queen suited is probably one of those hands that you like to 3-bet and get it in if you have to. But simply because King Queen suited has such amazing playability, and the fact you have position as well is so monstrous, I think you need to be raising those kinds of hands in this situation. Queen Jack suited, probably not. That's another one where you might want to be flatting here too, but really, really player dependent in this situation for sure. Anyway, he opts for the flat pre. That's fine. Great flop for King Queen. I don't think you're going to do anything here other than flat call. The ace of clubs, of course, is going to be a good turn for our opponent to bluff some of the time. I think you're still calling. Nice, good call. And on this river, we are blocking the flush draw, which is definitely a concern when people are betting turns like this. He bets 80 on the flop and 80 on the turn. So that's either very strong or very weak in my opinion. That's either saying he bet with ace high and then he made the ace and he's like, oh, I still want to get value. I don't want to be too scary, so I'm going to bet the same amount again. Or that's him going, I bet the flop because I know I'm supposed to, and then I know I'm supposed to bet this turn, but I don't want to risk too many chips. So it could go either way, really. And now, when he checks, I think we have to go for a value bet on this river now that he checks. The reason being is that bet size on the turn, right? If he was in the first category, like I was saying, if he bet 80 on the in the second category, if he bets 80 on the flop because he knows he's supposed to, or he thinks he's supposed to, and then he bets 80 on the turn because he's like trying to sucker us in. This is not the kind of run out where he's going to want to slow down that often, because only the backdoor clubs have come in, which we're not going to have all that often. We do have some King X, 9X combinations that are flushes though, potentially. So for the most parts, I think we're probably supposed to value bet here, unless we think that this person is very cautious and they would bet with an ace twice and then check on this river. But yeah, I think I'll probably lean towards a value bet once he checks. All right, nice. So I definitely don't blame you for checking back. I think it could go either way. I think on balance, I would probably lean a little bit more towards a value bet on the river. As played though, totally fine. I'm hoping that our friend is going to take some notes on this play, because this is a really interesting spot about those bet sizes. The way he was opting for the same bet size twice was weak, and that is something that will be prolific throughout all of his play, right? So even though this is one specific hand, if you ever catch people doing a pattern where it's like bet half pot flop and then bet the same amount on the turn, you'd be blown away at how frequently that same pattern will emerge in different situations where they're trying to show aggression but they don't know how. Nice. Very good. Very good. That's what we like to see. Okay, so we got a label in. Let's see what he does in this pot first. So the effective stack at this point is about 31. Like the limp? Limp is good. I want to see what this note is. And I'm so proud of you, Go Vegan. This event. Post flop maniac. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. It's he's typing post flop maniac in the chat. I think it's a little bit cut off in OBS here, but okay. So love that you're reaching for a label. Love that you're reaching for a note. Sorry guys, let's skip back here a second as well, really quick. I love that you're reaching for a label. I love that you're reaching for a note, but I think also it's important that we keep our notes a little bit more specific than that, right? So, post-flop maniac, I think might be a good start. I don't know if I'd call that a maniac play necessarily. He's basically c-betting and then trying to represent a king or an ace on the turn as well. So I actually don't mind his line. I think we might even be in that same category some of the time too. I think the important thing to note there was that he used unusual bet sizes on the flop and the turn, and that might indicate weakness in the future. Maybe another note might be that he c-bet flop and then continued scare turn as well. So we know that he's capable of having two barrels in this situation where scare card is coming on the turn. That's also good to know, because for the most part, recreational players don't have that second barrel. They're like, oh, I read somewhere that a c-bet is a good thing to do. And then they stopped reading at that point, right? They didn't read chapter 2 of like things that we should c-bet on the turn as well as a bluff and stuff. So anyway, yeah, he puts post-flop maniac. I know it's a little bit cropped here, guys, but it should be fine for you guys to understand what's going on. Okay. So we limp in here pre he checks. I actually don't mind a check on this flop with the king 9, specifically because it's a rainbow board, specifically because we have a 9 as well. That's really helpful because we're not that concerned about hands like 8-9, which has a gut shot, right? And 2 of a cards to a 6. We're not so concerned about hands like 7-8 making a straight here as well, because we're blocking that with the 9 ourselves too. It's a rainbow board. He hasn't shown any aggression pre-flop. I think betting is fine. I think betting is totally fine because you're going to get calls from 6s and 5s. But I also don't mind a check back here as well, just on this specific texture. Now, if this board was king 6-5 with 2 spades, 6-5 of spades or something like that, I would be way more inclined just to go ahead and start barreling off, because you're going to get calls from all the flush draws, all the straight draws. But on this kind of a texture, I think you're probably good to just check it back and try and let him catch up a little bit. The bet's totally fine too, though. So he just makes it half pot here, which seems like the correct size as well. Okay, cool. But it's all about that flop texture, right, guys? It's all about that. Queen 5 of spades is probably going to be an open here. This guy in the big blind is quite short, but 13 is fine. I think this is totally acceptable to raise up with the Queen 5 of spades here, especially at these stakes where people aren't going to be 3-betting as a bluff too often, or jamming at the frequency they really should. Okay. I think the limp here is good. Yep. So it looks like so far So far, we're seeing some really nice, some really good pre-flop decisions so far. The limp with the king nine previously in the small blind was great. I love this limp as well. As long as we're aware of the fact that we want to call raises. So the idea of limping with these hands, like us, like 10-7 suited or king nine off, is that we want to limp to try and force our opponents to try and control the size of the pot. We don't want to min raise and be forced to fold these really playable hands out of position. We want to limp, and then we're going to call up to something like 3 times, maybe even a little bit more, depending on the player. Okay, so he opts to check on this flop. I really don't mind betting on this flop texture, just leading on the flop, because first of all, it's a flop texture where he's not going to hit too often, because he probably needs a 5 or a 3 or some kind of an interesting straight draw in order to call. The fact that we have backdoor hearts is really helpful too, because if we bet the flop and it comes to heart on the turn, we can usually continue barreling, and we can sometimes get some 5s to fold or even some random floats to fold. So if we bet this flop and he's calling us with like Jack 10 or King Queen, or I guess that's not a good example, like Queen Jack, Queen 10, maybe he thinks, oh, he doesn't have a 5 or 3, I'm going to call and try and hit the turn. You can continue barreling pretty liberally. Plus, we have 2 overcards ourselves, so we actually are taking the initiative here. Check is also fine. Probably going to bet turn here, I suppose. Yep. Okay. Okay, that's fine. I think you just need to be taking a little bit more initiative in these pots, especially at these stakes where people are playing very fit or fold. Just taking the initiative on the flop and seeing what happens is great, right? And this isn't a situation where if we bet flop, we're going to get in loads of trouble on a later street, right? So we're not in a situation where if we're betting and he's calling and he wakes up with a 3, we're going to end up doing a stack. So I think it's nice just to be stabbing at these, because you're going to get so many folds on this turn. I think betting is totally acceptable if you're going to check flop too. I think the check is probably a little bit too weak in this situation though, and we're pretty much just giving up on the hand whenever they bet. Yeah, so just take the initiative a little bit more often in these situations, especially as they haven't shown any strength pre-flop. I think just stabbing flop or stabbing turn is totally fine. I don't think stab is the correct terminology there, but you know what I mean. All right, so our friend here is very short. Okay, he folds anyway. Yeah, King Jack, of course, is always a call versus shove in that situation. Now where are we at? We're at 22 big blinds effective. By the way, guys, the way I'm doing that is actually using the Stars Helper, that this piece of Stars Helper software that I think I might have mentioned in previous videos. We're partnered with Stars Helper. If you want to get your hands on it, that's the software that's generating these nice numbers here. Nothing advanced. This is actually being generated by Hold'em Manager, but this isn't. I don't use this on stream. These numbers here with the big blinds and all the effective stack, that's being generated by Stars Helper, which is the tool that I use when we're streaming and when we're playing online. But it just simplifies your thought process really nicely, so you don't have to do any math, because math is hard, obviously. But that's how I'm coming to that conclusion. I'm looking at that effective stack. So he decides to min raise with the ace-7 of hearts here. He gets clicked back. I'm so interested to see what he does in this situation. I absolutely do not give this any credit whatsoever. I'm shoving this straight down, straight in his face. Min 3 bets are one of 2 things, and I would say approximately 3/4 of the time they are the first thing. So they either one, complete garbage. Like I don't know who's been teaching people to min 3 bet, but it seems like it's monumental, like just so much garbage. And then sometimes you find the person who's min 3 betting with aces, right? It doesn't matter which one it is, because we know that the vast majority of the time it's not going to be strong. In my experience, even at the higher stakes, people who are min 3 betting are doing it with complete trash or like weak medium strength hands that just can't stand to be shoved on. So I would always, like a hand like ace-7 of hearts, I would always just shove this in against the min 3 bet. And if he does turn up with aces, we'll make a note that he min 3 bets with aces, and then forevermore we'll know exactly how he's treating those big pairs. And that's actually even more beneficial to know than to just fold and never know in the future, right? If we know that he's always min 3 betting aces, it just becomes the easiest game in the world to play, because then we have a note and we're never going to make that mistake against him again, and he's never going to sucker us in again. You can tell he's conflicted. I can tell he's conflicted about this here. The flat is also fine. Ace-7 of hearts is a very nice hand. It's very playable from out of position. I don't think this is aggressive enough against what is a very weak play. But also, I don't blame him for flatting either. I think that's fine. He has a great price. In fact, you really should be flatting almost any 2 cards against a min 3 bet, which is why I think it's such a poor play. And there's the top pair situation. Okay, on the turn we have to start betting, of course. The reason we have to bet here is because we can get lots of action from a queen. He can still have kings. He can still have jacks. He can still have tens. Um, we're very rarely going to be losing a big pot against an ace because, of course, we're chopping it on the turn because it would be ace 3-3 queen, ace 3-3 queen, which is the best 5-card hand. So the only ace that we're losing to is ace queen or ace king, of course. What's the size here? What's the size I'd like to use? I think something like 105 would be 105, 120, something like that would be cool. This seems weak. I would love to just go bigger here. We really want to consider what we're getting value from here. If he has king queen, or if he has a queen of any variety that isn't ace queen, sorry guys, big tractor driving by. If he has a queen, he's definitely going to call a larger size here. And the vast majority of the value that we're going to get from this hand is going to be on the turn rather than on the river, because if he does have any of those hands like kings or jacks, he's not usually going to call 2 bets turn and river unless they're extremely small. I would rather bet like 120 here, 105 here on the turn, and then reassess river than bet small and then be in a weird situation on the river when it comes one of those cards. So yeah, I like the bet. I think probably a little bit bigger is better though. If you consider the kinds of stuff that we're going to get called by, basically, which I think is going to call a bigger bet. Yeah. And I mean, so by process of deduction right there anyway, right? He's never going to fold a king to that size. He's never going to fold kings or maybe even jacks to that size bet on the turn. So by process of deduction, the min through that was trash, or at least it wasn't a strong hand. At least maybe not trash. Trash is a bit of a strong word. So definitely, I would prefer just to go ahead and slam it in pre-flop for sure. But nice hand. God, there's so many cars driving by today. I do apologize, guys. It's like I'm living on a motorway. Queens in the big feels good. This was the same game as well. Something that we maybe forgot to mention. This was the guy that limped with the aces, wasn't it? I would have noted the fact that he limps between 20 and 25 big blinds effective with an ace as well. I don't know why I'm thinking about that now, but that's definitely a note to make on people, because most people aren't raising or are raising their aces from the button. So it's to see something so unusual, it's important that we note it, and also it'll stop us from getting in that position as well earlier where he had to call it off with a 6, or he felt like he needed to call it off with a 6 again on the ace high board. I was talking. I hope I didn't miss anything there. This is good. This is fine. This is fine. This is an interesting spot where I think a lot of people are a bit confused. So in this situation, this is a really interesting spot to talk about, actually. So our opponent on the from the butt is shoving about 6 big blinds effective. At these really low stack depths, excuse me. Even stronger opponents are going to be shoving some very, very weak stuff. Even people that don't know what kind of stuff they can shove are going to be shoving weak stuff. So here's a situation where, like in a vacuum, if he shoves 6 big blinds, we theoretically can call with ace 5 off from the small blind. But we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we flat 170 and then we allow the big blind to come along with us. We also know for a fact that it's probably okay to shove ace 5 off into the big blind when we're limped to as well. Like, I think it's probably right in there. So in this situation, we make a decision based on what we could do theoretically as a call, and then we also need to reassess the action that's behind us as well. So in this situation, guys, I take it back. Sorry, I thought, ignore me. I thought this guy was on the button. He shoved on the button. After this guy limps, this is actually a very different situation. I apologize. So he limps the button, which is a very unusual play. I actually think the shove here is a little bit dangerous. We know that this guy has limped with aces before in the past, right? We know that he's capable of limping with hands which are a little unusual. This is a situation where a lot of people like to limp to try and induce this person to shove the 6 big blinds, okay? For that reason, I like the fact that you're isolating, but I think this could get us in trouble. I think this could be a big hand some of the time. It could also just be complete weakness as well. So We're never really sure, but I feel like ace 5 off probably isn't the hand that you want to be isolating against the limped button here. Okay, so sorry about getting confused, guys. I thought the button was over here. It's the UFC table. But this is kind of exactly what we're talking about, right? So we've correctly identified that this player is capable of limping with some unusual hands. We've also correctly identified that it's really unusual for them to be limping when there's a player who's so short in the small blind. So short, in fact, that even players that aren't paying attention that much will notice how short they are. So we've actually spotted it. I swear to God, I haven't actually watched this video before, guys, but we've been hitting the nails on the head so far. To re-isolate with ace 5 is a little bit dangerous. I think that ace 5 off is kind of, might even just be a fold here, because the fact that the button limped and it looks so suspicious. Ace 5 isn't really going to perform that well, even if our button is just there with any 2 cards. It does become a little bit dicey. Deuce. Okay, yeah, and we're losing a pretty big pot here to the queens. I really like this guy's play with the queens, by the way. I think he plays that hand really well. He's correctly identified a situation where the small blind can be going broke really light. It turns out that the small blind actually has a hand that he's never going to fold, which is always nice too. But yeah, I'm going to see what this note is. Standard shove with queen jack of spades. That's fine. Nice. Okay, cool. So he's making a note here. If you guys can't see, he's saying limp trap button with queen x1. An important note here. An important note that you forgot to add. Go vegan. Love the note, by the way. You need to indicate more about that situation. So it wasn't just that he was limping the button with queens. You also need to indicate the stack depth at which he did it, and maybe a little bit more about the fact that the small blind was short. Because if he's doing that with queens, he's going to do the same thing with a lot of his other strong hands too. So I would say limp trap button queen queen times 1, or I would say limp trap button queen queen with short stack and small blind, and then maybe the effective stack size or something like that. Just a little bit more information, because you might never see this guy for 6 months, and when you come back, you're just going to assume every time that he limps the button that he's got queens, when the situation itself actually lent itself more to the limp than anything else. So maybe he never traps with queens, except for those weird situations where one of the people in the blinds are shallow. A little bit of an improvement you could have made there. And also you can go back and add these as well if you'd like. After the fact, you got to search for him, find his name, and add him to your notes. Nice flat for Jack 7. Flat it all day. Flat it all day, buddy. Yep. Give him the rope. Give him the rope. There you go. Easy call. Nice. Very nice. Very, very nice. Jack 5 of diamonds, by the way, should have been a shove from him, guys. At that stack depth, Jack 5 just goes in pre. It's just a standard Nash shove. And at those stack depths, it's very rare that you want to be doing anything other than following Nash. Just because you're going to have the best hands so often there pre-flop, and if you can generate fold equity of any variety, it's going to be fantastic for your bottom line when they're so crippled. Limp seems good. Yep. Oof, no. This is a tough one. 9-8 off is a hand that has pretty good playability. At 12.5 big blinds effective or 13 big blinds effective, if you want to round up, you really don't want to be min-raise folding hands like 9-8 off. I think probably you're not going to get punished that often at these stakes, but just generally speaking, as you're moving up, if you're min-raising off of this stack depth, people are going to be jamming against you a lot, and you're going to be forced to fold this hand, which really sucks because 9-8 is a pretty playable hand, especially when you have position. I think at the stack depth, I prefer to limp with 9-8 and then call a small raise, a very small raise at the stack depth, maybe 2 or 2.5x ISO. Yeah, that's it's probably fine, but I think my range is, or my play at this stack depth is to limp with 9-8 off. All right, check is good. Check is good. Good flop for 9-10. Okay. I think the bet is probably fine. The biggest problem I have with this situation is we have the 10 of hearts, which means we're blocking both flush draws and we're blocking straight draws. I mean, when you've got top pair and you're up and down, you really can't really do much wrong. You have to be, yeah, I mean, you have to, you're not going to make too many mistakes here. So I'm trying to imagine like what a good setup for us would be in this situation, right? So if you bet flop and they have a 7 or an 8, they'll probably call, or if they have a 6 they might call, or if they have a 10 they might call, but you're blocking the 10. But then, like, are we really gonna bet 3 times and then be like, oh cool, yeah, like I had top pair and I just got loads of value? I think probably it looks a lot weaker if we check and let them bet their 7s and their 8s and maybe some of their 10s and maybe some of their 6s or maybe their hearts, and then we try and put in a raise or something like that, because we really don't mind getting the chips in here regardless, right? But if we check raise, we can actually have a lot of the stuff that we kind of want him to have as well, right? So if he's here with a 7 or an 8 and we check and he bets and we raise, or we go all in, or whatever we want to do, we could have a flush draw, we could have a bear 6, we could also have an 8 that they might have out kicks, we could also have like a 7, or we could have like, I don't know. But if we're leading, my real question is, what are we going to do on the turn in this situation, right? So if we bet and it comes to deuce of diamonds in the turn, do we continue betting? I guess we do, right? But are we going to get more value from an 8 or a 7? Because at that point, it's going to be pretty obvious. We've got at least a straight draw and 2 overcards or something, right? Like Queen 10 or something like that. It just seems like it's really strong, and we're not going to get a ton of value off of the hands that we'd like, and we're not making ourselves look any weaker if we're just making ourselves look stronger by betting turn. Also, if we check flop and he bets and we get to raise, it means that we have a really easy way to get the chips in on the turn. So if we check and he bets 40 and we make it 120, I'm not sure if that's what we would do, but let's say we do. It makes it really easy to shove turn, and it means we've gotten a lot of value from our very strong hand with a draw. By leading, I think we're going to force a lot of people to fold. I mean, if I have a 7 here and people are leading into me, I'm probably going to give up a lot of the time. If somebody's leading into me and I have like 8 deuce suited or something like that, which is something that I could definitely have at the stack depth, I'm probably going to give up as well, because I'm like, if they have a bear 10, they probably have good equity against my hand. Like, I'm not going to, do you know what I'm saying? So we want to keep all that stuff in, and we also want to make ourselves look as weak as possible, and we also want a way to get the chips in faster. But if we bet 40 and they call, the pot isn't inflating fast enough. So I guess the only line for us to take would be to bet 40. They would call, which means there's 120, 160, which would leave us with 340. So we probably end up having to overbet jam the turn. If we check and they bet, they might bet 40 and we could make it 100, and then we could shove turn, in which case we would be winning a pot of 280. So immediately you can see that there's probably more value in the check raise, and also keeping in a lot of the weak stuff that might want to call a bet on a later street. Because we're not really too worried about anything in this situation. We're blocking the hearts, and of course we're improving into the best possible straight here. So unless it comes to 10, which is very unlikely because there's already 1 in your hand, there's really not too many bad turns that you're going to be upset about by just checking. So if he checks back, we're fine. If he bets, we can check raise. And yeah, I think that's definitely the line to make here. The lead is probably going to be the least, the worst way to do it. Once we get raised, though, of course, the money's going to go in. It's no problem at all. If he has King 9 or something, it's whatever. It's fine. I guess King 9 or Queen 9 or something is going to be here. Wow, we are on the ball today. And no improvement. Okay, well, fair enough. That's fine. That's going to happen. Just wait until this game restarts. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's session review. We do have a couple of these from a couple of our members. So maybe I'll do a series where we'll cover a couple different games that they've submitted. In the future, guys, if you do want to send in your videos, I would suggest just sending 1 or 2. I mean, the more the better. That's fine. It's great to have more content to cover. But generally speaking, because it's just one game takes us so long to cover because there's so much cool stuff to talk about. It's probably best for you just to send 1 or 2 so we don't have a huge backlog of stuff to cover. And also, if you guys want to send these in, it's completely free. We do these session reviews for free as long as you're a member of the OP Poker community, which is free to join. Go and check out our Discord channel. Become a member of a fantastic poker community, and we can help each other to improve faster. So yeah, get those in, guys. This is going to be it for us for now. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, bye.